One. Hey, welcome everybody to this session here of Virtual Coaches Clinic. Today, Basketball Embassy Edition, and very excited to have Ross McMains and Zico Coronel with us here. And we're going to be talking offense, talking about punishing pick and roll coverages. And so really just we got started a little late here just because of a technical glitch, but we got it worked out, so we're up and running. So without any further ado, Ross, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you guys take it away.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to jump on and share my screen. This thing rolling. Great. Zeke, that's clear on your end?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. All right. Hey, thank you guys for joining us. Look, right off the bat, you'll see the same slide at the end, but efficientsauce.com. As soon as this presentation's over, please go visit it. Got a rapid fire session coming tomorrow. Look, confidence, concepts, competence, community, you're going to get all that from this kind of coaching hub that we're building here. So hopefully off the back of this, you guys can go check it out.
For the purposes of today's coverage, we're looking at preventing and punishing coverages. This is applicable to any trigger action. You can prevent them or you can punish them. And for the purposes of this talk, we're narrowing it down to ball screens, and the coverage we're going to focus on is shows. In terms of what do the two things mean, prevent and punish. Preventing the coverage, you can see the definition there, means preventing the opponent from defending an action with their primary coverage, their preferred coverage. And that leads to them having to employ a compromised coverage, an emergency coverage, so a secondary coverage, or complete defensive breakdown. And some of these terms we will elaborate upon throughout the presentation. So if they don't make 100% of sense now, they will very soon.
On the other end, to punish a coverage simply means, again, as you see the definition there, punishing the coverage means that you accept that the coverage is going to occur and using your coverage solution, technical and tactical skills to generate an efficient shot. So in terms of the show that we'll be talking about today, accepting that they will show on the ball screen and finding the best way to punish it from that point on.
So why would you prevent or punish the show? These are thoughts that as a coach, a coaching staff, you would think about. You would think about them longitudinally, so in your season planning, and then you would think about them in planning for your particular upcoming opponent. So do we have the technical ability and tactical acumen to punish the coverage versus this opponent? If we do, then we're going to be more likely to go towards punish the coverage. If we don't, then there's more prevention strategies that we would become our point of emphasis. How much does our success depend on this ball handler in particular, sometimes screener, taking shots compared to creating shots? So if our ball handler really is a big part of our ability to put the ball in the hole, we're going to be more oriented towards prevent. If when we talk about screener, we're talking about, for example, if pick and pop for Dirk Nowitzki is very important and they're going to hard show to try to eliminate that, we would be more likely to try to prevent that hard show to open up separation for Nowitzki on the pop. And one thing we really want to be mindful of is not becoming a prisoner of the coverage. We don't want to go into the game and say, okay, we're going to run pick and roll, they're going to show, and the whole game's going to come down to whether we can beat that show or not. If we do, we win. If we don't, we lose. We feel like then we're a prisoner of the coverage. So sometimes we will be able to defeat it, but if we can't, we need some backup strategies. So strategic approach would be to go less pick and roll, more mash. So there's a screen into a handoff to loosen all the coverage to get greater separation, more pin downs, more alternative triggers, post-ups, isolations, whatever you may choose. We could choose to increase the tempo. So basically like playing fast breaks. So for example, if we didn't want to be a prisoner of the zone, we might play at a higher tempo to try to prevent them from setting their zone. And then if we really wanted to gear that disruptive defense, turnovers, runouts. from a tactical standpoint, if we wanted to not be a prisoner of the coverage, we might prevent the coverage.
Perfect. So this is one way this could play out, this decision of why to prevent or why to punish. This particular example is going to be choosing to prevent the coverage. But again, as Zico alluded to, based on kind of those questions you ask, this process may go different directions, game to game or team to team that you have. So this is a situation here. We'll set the stage. This is the 17-18 playoffs. The Blazers are playing the Pelicans. In this series, the Pelicans swept the Blazers 4-0. They came out, they blitzed, they showed, they trapped Damian Lillard. For the most part, the Blazers accepted that this was going to be the coverage they were going to have to deal with, and they tried their best to punish it. They did not experience much success. 2 clips here to allude to that experience for them. Oh, sorry. So in this series overall, Lillard averages 18.5 points per game, 4.75 assists per game, shoots 35.2% from the field, and is at 0.511 points per possession in pick and roll. That also includes the passes he made off ball screens. So a really poor performance overall for him, and greatly impacted by the coverage that the Pelicans put on him and him having to deal with that. You can see here, dealing with the hard show right here, turnover on the short roll pass. Not only is his passing ability in this situation not up to the standard of dealing with the coverage, but also the personnel around it. You see Mo Harkless in the backside corner number 4 here, right? He's a guy who the Pelicans have decided to completely play off of. So now you're seeing a coverage that typically you don't in blitz or show coverages. And so something that the Blazers really struggled with in this series. Same deal here. Again, you can see Anthony Davis coming off the strong side corner right here, completely disrespecting Al-Farouq Aminu also. So Aminu and Harkless, both in this series, had games where they went 1 of 5 from 3. Lillard had 2 games, one with 7 turnovers, one with 8 turnovers. So attempting to punish a coverage, not a successful strategy for the Blazers in this series from a tactical standpoint for them, and also because of their personnel. Fast forward a year later, and they play the Thunder in the first round, a team that naturally plays a pretty aggressive defensive scheme at this point. So this is 18-19 season, and generally they do have Steven Adams right up at the level, pretty aggressive in flat shows, and especially with Dame, an emphasis on trying to get after him. In this series, he averages 33 a game, 6 assists per game, 45.3% from the field, and was +1 points per possession in pick and roll, including passes. So double what he was in the previous year's series. While they improved greatly through the year in their acumen and being able to punish the coverage and being able to punish aggressive coverages like shows and blitzes, when it got to this point in the playoffs, there was a clear shift in strategic approach. They shifted towards just some very basic prevention strategies. And what you'll see here is them using basic wedge screens and ram screens to try to loosen the screener's defender up so Lillard can still be the scorer that they need him to be. Let this run. Set the screen. Dame Lillard now has his pocket available to rise for 3. Here Aminu sets a screen for Cantor. Space for Lillard to attack, turn the corner, draw the foul. This one speaks to both their attempt in trying to prevent the coverage with the ram screen, McCollum on Cantor, but then also their growth in the ability to punish the coverage. Rather than completely preventing a show here, they still deal with a compromised show where Adams does get up to the level for the most part. But Lillard grows in his passing ability from one year to the next, and their spacing gets better on the backside. So just a good example of kind of how that can play out. Shifting to Zeke, do you have anything to add to that?
That's good.
Cool. Shifting to kind of just the philosophy around screener priorities. And a number of guys have touched on this topic and covered it pretty well. So I don't want to leave those guys out, and make sure to mention, from Alex Sarama to Francesco Nani, Liam Flynn, Stefan Grassinger, Brent Tipton have all published different articles and videos detailing a lot of the stuff in this section right here that has been done really well. But kind of trying to simplify the process for our screeners and just give them basic goals and understanding how to enter into dealing with coverages from a punish or prevent standpoint. And so number one, just arrive alone. And we'll get to showing a kind of a continuum later on, but this can range from arriving slightly alone, where there's minimal separation, where the coverage is more compromised, compared to arriving super alone, where you completely prevent the coverage altogether. And there's a number of ways that can be done, which we will cover as this goes on. Number two part, once they have arrived alone, now trigger an advantage. And that's defined kind of three different definitions to that. Number one, if you can get two to defend the ball, the moment you can get a commitment from the screener's defender to commit to the ball, that would be one version of triggering an advantage. Number two, a term that we use called gentleman's stance. This would be when the ball handler's defender opens up in a stance based on the threat of the screen or the contact of the screen that is essentially saying, ball handler, please go forwards ahead of me. They've opened up their stance. They're not squared on the ball anymore. And there's already a path to the rim for the ball handler. This would be an advantage. And then third, a mismatch. Obviously, if a switch is triggered, that would be an advantage. So at the point that advantage is triggered, now the coverage must be punished. Whether you attempted to prevent it in the first place or not, at this point, as a group, we must recognize the coverage that's being performed and our best way to punish it that maximizes the advantage and now puts us in a state of dominoes. Dominoes, a term that we've used in a lot of, if you look at our Instagram, I've done a podcast recently on it, but basically dominoes being the moment an advantage is created. Advantage defined by one closeout, one rotation, one mismatch, and now turning those dominoes into one great shot for your team by continuing to move the ball, space the floor, and not allowing the defense to catch back up and keep expanding that advantage. Cool.
So just to clarify for the question, so the difference between a ram screen and a wedge screen, they're certainly cousins. Ram screen, basically the pathway of the screen and the cutter is parallel to the sideline. A wedge screen tends to be set on the wing, and the screen angle and the pathway of the big coming into the screen tends to be parallel to the baseline. And these are both common terms. So if you put them into YouTube, you'll certainly find some wedge and you'll certainly find some ram. All right, primary versus emergency coverages. Okay, so the primary coverage is the defense's first preferred choice coverage. So if they've decided they want to show, that's their preferred choice, that's their primary. The emergency coverage is the coverage the defense reverts to when the primary coverage is compromised to the point of breakdown. So if they don't go to the emergency, you will get an efficient shot. So this might be, for example, you prevent the show and they revert to a medium drop, or they switch, or so on and so on. What are the implications for the offense? They're quite complex, it can be. On a basic level, if you choose to prevent the primary coverage, you need to be prepared to punish the emergency coverage. So if you decide you want to prevent the show and they therefore revert to an emergency coverage of a deep drop, you need to be prepared to punish that with all your different coverage solutions. On a real basic level, we saw Damian Lillard get to the pull-up three because the defense, the big, was now late. On a more complex level, there's a lot of thought you have to do as a coach if you're trying to have an awesome total coverage solution tactical package. So you may need to consider your coverage solution, prevent and or punish, for both the primary coverage and the emergency coverage. And a little play that takes into account both of these is when someone uses a ram screen to prevent the show into Spain pick and roll that prevents the medium drops. So the RAM screen stops them showing and they go to their emergency coverage, which is in a medium drop. And then you Spain pick and roll, back screen that big and medium drops and get your aggressive driver downhill on the rim. From a player's perspective, within the possession, in the moment as it happens, they must be able to transition their tactical thinking from solving the primary coverage into punishing the emergency coverage. So the example we have there, they're attacking medium drops. The big, say, for example, pick and pops or dives, and they peel switch, veer off. So the guard peels or veers off and picks up the big. And now you need to be punishing the switch. So this is not the time that you want the guard to take a 17-foot contested pull-up against the big. They need to recognize that the switch has occurred and then go in to their switch attack, dive in the big, pass from the slot, attack the mouse, boomerangs to the guard, attacking the big. All these punish the switch type coverages that I'm sure that many of you are aware of. And so what you see here in this clip is Tenerife. They're going to prevent the primary coverage, which is Valencia nexting, and then they force Valencia into a medium drop, and you see the players transition their thinking immediately into punishing that medium drop. So you'll see here the next come, they twist it, and now transition immediately into punishing the medium drop. So ball screens occurring, there's the next, and then number 4, Iverson sees he has no advantage, so he twists back. Gentleman's stance, he's out of there, could have got out a little earlier, and now they're in to punish that medium drop. Short roll, and then 2-on-1 advantage on the backside, short roll to kick out, catch and shoot 3. So that's a great job of the players transitioning from a prevent to a punish.
All right, now shifting to preventing the coverage. We'll focus on this section before we shift to speaking about punishing the coverage. We talked about this continuum. So you can see here, when we're talking about prevent the coverage, we do not want to be a prisoner of the coverage. So you saw the example of the Trailblazers in year 1 versus the Pelicans. They end up being a prisoner of the coverage. They end up spending the whole series trying to attack blitzes, trying to attack shows, and they face failure as a function of it. Year 2, they decide they're not going to be a prisoner of the coverage. They're going to face compromised coverages because of different sets they run to prevent it. And so this ranges on a spectrum, on a continuum, as you can see here. So compromise on the far left in this situation, compromise being that's more arriving slightly alone, as we alluded to in the screener priorities part. And so sometimes it's not necessarily a massive gap between, in terms of talking about a show, not necessarily a massive gap now between the defender and the screener, but just enough where the coverage has been softened up. Shifting over, then you have prevent. Now you've shifted them completely to an emergency coverage, from being in a show to being in a drop, like you saw on that wedge screen for Damian Lillard, where he had space to rise up for 3. And then third, avoid. Now that's more of the situations that Zico alluded to, where we're talking about now you're shifting your strategy rather than dealing with the shows that you don't necessarily feel the confidence with your team to attack by punishing the coverage. You shift to trying to run more mash actions or pin downs or speed up the tempo, and that would be avoiding, but all on a continuum of preventing the coverage. Strategies. We're going to define these as we go on, and we'll show film. And so just a basic run through and contents of them. Change of speed and direction, change of angle of the screen, receiving a screen, the screener getting a screen, receiving a screen. What we call caught in coverage. We'll dive deeper into these last 3. We'll dive deeper into caught in coverage, warning signs, and coverage calls. Some more advanced concepts when it comes to preventing the coverage. All right. First one, simply change of speed and direction. And these different prevention strategies will range from ones that are simply conceptual, that your players can learn and do on your own at any given point in the game, can be done outside of a given set when you're in randoms, but are simply kind of skills and concepts that they can learn to help them and aid them with preventing coverages in multiple situations throughout the game, whereas other things we'll present are more tactical for you as a coach to work into sets that you're going to run, and different concepts that you can use tactically to prevent the coverage. So change of speed and direction. This is one in particular is one that your players can embrace. When we talk about arriving alone, this is simply accelerating on a sprint from a long or short distance to arrive alone at the screen. Changing direction, making a sudden change of direction to arrive alone at the screen. And so a lot of this has to do with not selling your action too early. Sometimes it may be the example of you're running down in transition as a trail man and you have your head on the rim and you know you're going to go into the drag screen. You know they're showing, but rather than veering off into that drag screen already from half court and letting everyone in the gym know you're going to set that ball screen, it becomes a sudden change of direction where you don't sell your action early and it's a quick burst. Change of angle. Just before arriving at the screen, flipping the angle of the screen to leave the defender on the wrong side. Something that Anderson Varejao was a master at a time where shows were very prevalent in the NBA, but would constantly catch the show on the wrong side. And then the third concept we'll touch on here that you'll see multiple clips of as we go on is warning signs. And so defined as a deterrent to perform a certain coverage. And this can be done in multiple ways. One, conceptually for the player, and two, tactically. But if a team is going to commit to showing, it often means that you can punish them in ways in wanting to do the preparation work to get to that show that throws caution to the wind the next time they try to get so connected so early to a screener to get to their hard show, or that they shift in early on the backside to load up as their low man gets ready to take on the roller for the show. And it's little warning signs that sometimes can deter someone from wanting to be as aggressive as they are in the coverage.
I think with warning signs, it kind of removes X5 from being able to help as much as they ordinarily would, because they're generally starting to prepare for the show, and you either punish that or someone else has to take over his help responsibility, and that leads to those whip it passes that Ross referred to you, and you'll see.
Here, so running through just a couple basic examples of those. So you'll see change of speed and direction, just noting the speed of the sprint here. David Kravish really taking off on a sprint into that pick in that situation. You can see hands on his knees, not selling his action early, and then an absolute dead sprint into the ball screen. All right, coverage compromised. Not completely alone, not super alone, but compromised. This one is interesting from Tomic here. You can see again that same hands on hip stance that we talked about with Kravish. He's not selling his action early. He's at the elbow. He could be there for an elbow catch. He could be there for multiple things, but it's a quick, short burst. It doesn't have to be a long sprint all the time. Here he just makes a quick, short burst to separate and arrive slightly alone, and just that alone compromises the coverage. Here's warning signs that pair well with that sprint into it. Sometimes you can catch that defender trying to beat you up to the level of the screen to get to their show. And that back cut deters them from being that connected the next time. Same thing here in transition from Vincent Poirier in a drag situation. And then here, talking about changing angle of the screen. The show is on one side, angle flipped, and this flips the whole help responsibility of the backside in this situation, as you can see. The low man is shifting in, ready to help, because he's going to be the low man on the two side. But now as the ball comes this way, that ball is arriving way quicker than he expected, because he's now on the front side. Same situation here by Elton Brand. Sprinting in, flipping the screen, catching the show on the wrong side. A great prevent the coverage strategy that's very simple for your players to pick up. Next part is get a screen. So using a screen to get the screener separation running into the screen. Ram screens and wedge screens used in this situation, amongst others. Again, Zico spoke to the difference between the two of those. This is using a screen from a separate player to loosen up the defender on the screener that is trying to stay connected and get to a show. Here, you can see Bilbao uses a boomerang to start with that shifts the attention away from the ball handler, where he gets off the ball while the ram screen's happening and then receives the ball back right away. So this is a pairing of concepts that fit together very well in trying to prevent the show. Ball's passed, passed back on the boomerang. At the same time, screener's arriving alone because of the ram screen. And one more time. Boomerang, pass, pass back. Same thing here with the ram. This time out of a stagger. Opens up space, open pocket to rise for the shot. Here is a pairing of concepts. Again, so now we have the ram combined with a flip screen. So in this situation, they set the ram in a situation that forces the screener's defender to go under. So now they've been baited into being disconnected because they took the easiest route. The flip screen now also leaves the screener on the wrong side if they were to chase over the top of that. Coverage prevented. Now dealing with medium drops. Same thing, ram with a flip screen. Okay, again, a pairing of concepts that fit very well together. Next concept, now getting a little bit more advanced, is caught in coverage, what we call caught in coverage. And in two parts of this we're going to talk about direct provocation. And so this means putting X5, if we're assuming they're the one who's in the show, same could be said if 4 is the one you're trying to prevent from showing, but putting the screener's defender in an action directly with that screener that triggers a coverage that then when they try to get to their coverage on the ball screen, it's prevented because it's hard to perform 2 in a row. And so this can be done multiple ways. Through pick and roll with a basic rescreen by setting the screen with the show, rolling out, and then quickly coming back into it. A collay cut, which we'll detail here on the video that you'll see. Setting a back screen to loosen up the defender, which often is also a warning sign where it's an opportunity to steal a layup if they want to stay connected. Setting a pin down, often if a team wants to top lock, you can get the screener's defender to drop off, and now naturally it's much easier to arrive alone at the screen. Or a cross screen, same deal. You can get the screener's defender to drop off and then arrive at the screen alone. Read screen situation from Hapoel Jerusalem. You can see they deal with the show the first time, but not with the mindset to punish that coverage. Simply to trigger it, use it to provoke the reaction of the show, so now the screener can come back and arrive alone. He bails out of his role early and now opens up the pocket 3. Same situation here. Show bails out of the roll and now arrives alone, and the ball handler gets to deal with the drop. The collay cut is much of the same family as the rescreen. But, oh, sorry, this is actually a rescreen into a quartet. We'll move on to the collay cut after this. Jeez. Sorry, fellas. This is the same rescreen concept. It's just instead of coming back to set the screener bails out of the roll early, but now Gortat's his recovering defender to give the ball handler the downhill advantage. So he both prevents the show, but also prevents the ability to get to a late drop in this situation. Okay, one more time on that. Here's the Calais cut that we're talking about. This would be a rescreen, but a situation where the screener rolls out of the first action where they show, and now as the ball is moved, bails out of the roll into a separate screen with a separate player. Calais cut, named after Vincent Collet with the French national team, where we first saw it with. He used it often. Fernando de Colo, very tough action to deal with. You can see first screen here. He rolls out and then is bailing out of the roll right into the second screen. So now you're dealing with a drop coverage on the second one. Coverage prevented. Same situation here. Quick boomerang. You get a first screen on this side. This one to me is the hardest one to guard. And in this situation, the defense is in drops. But use the imagination and imagine if they were in a show on this first action. Nicolo Melli sprints out of this and now is veering right into the second screen, going from outside, a step up on one side, to a step up on the other side. Again, very tough to deal with. Just seeing the space that the screener's defender has to cover, you can see it'd be very difficult to get from a show on one side to show on the other side. Set a back screen. Again, a very easy concept for your players to work in. By setting a back screen, the big has to drop and help, and now the coverage is compromised. Same thing here, back screen set, and then sprinting into the ball screen. Opens up the pocket, forces the big to drop. Again, this is a warning sign, right? If you're able to, if the big does not drop off to help, a lot of the time you're freeing a player for an open three or an open layup at the rim if they curl to the rim on it. Something that your bigs can learn to recognize just as they're running up into the screening action. They're running up to set a ball screen and they see a help defender already shrinking in, setting the back screen often will force a reaction from their own man. Can also be built into sets tactically. Setting a screen pin down. This team's in a top lock coverage. And so you can see it forces the big to drop off, right? So they use the pin down to leverage being able to prevent the coverage on the ball screen action. Top lock coverage, big drops off. Now coverage is compromised. This is a unique one, all right? There's a cross screen set below, so they leverage using the post up to soften the coverage on the ball screen. Rewind it back. Again, they use a boomerang here, so ball is hit to the wing. The big in this situation is setting a cross screen for a post up three in Nikola Kalinic, a guy who's a pretty good post threat down there. You can see his defender, the five-man's defender, has to drop off to help on the cross screen. As that's happening, Udo, the five-man, is already sprinting up into this ball screen, arriving alone, so there's space for Bobby Dixon to attack off of it. This is something that Fenerbahce also used in situations where if they had a player, a post player at the 3 or the 4 spot, who would be fronted, who was dealing with a front coverage defensively, they would run that man up. They would, instead of flashing high-low, they would have the big who would normally catch on the high-low pass, they would run him up into a ball screen and essentially be able to arrive alone because his man would want to be still under the rim, serving as a low man to help on the front coverage. Next phase of caught in coverage is indirect provocation. So this is essentially using an action with 2 separate players to provoke X5 in this situation, who's going to get into the show to be a helper. So now when the ball is moved into an action that he's going to be involved in, his man is light. This can be done through pick and roll, what we would call a two-hit combo you see on the film, through off-ball screens, or through post-ups. Again, this is a little bit more complex than the direct provocation. Here you can see Tenerife uses two pick and rolls in a row. First pick and roll, they leverage that this team is going to be in a show coverage on the four-man. This is the four-man who's rolling out of this. They're in a show coverage, so naturally the five-man has to drop into the paint to help on this. Five-man has to drop into the paint to help on this, and now as a result, coverage is compromised, and it's an easier play to make. If you look back at the timing of this, this play is almost perfect from the standpoint of how much the five-man has to help. But because the five is a little bit late on his timing running up into this screen, X5 has time to recover, and now it ends up being slightly alone on the arrival. It could have been super alone if he sprinted on airtime of that pass. Same deal here, using one ball screen, they're showing with the four to soften the coverage on the second ball screen with the five. Again, this in a sense can be a warning sign. This is a very typical two-hit combo for pick and roll, where you run a side pick and roll and then move it into a middle pick and roll. A lot of teams play this side pick and roll not very seriously, not in a way where they're really trying to engage in the action, but more often just to get it onto the middle on ball. But if the side pick and roll is played in a way where it's an active trigger and you're really trying to score off of it, it forces X5 to have to respect that and sit back in the paint and be prepared to be a helper. Or it forces the next ball handler's defender right here, the nail man, to sink in and be in a shrink coverage. Here, both X5 and the player guarding the man up top are preparing for their show. And so they allow the side pick and roll to be real here. So this ends up being a warning sign for the next time that action is tried to be run, where potentially X5 is now dropped off further and the nail is loaded. And so it softens up the coverage on the middle ball screen the next time around. Last one, this is pretty unique situation here. The defense is in a forced baseline coverage on the post up, where they're bringing their five-man over on low man help on a four-man post up. You can see the five-man wheels middle as they typically would in this situation. But as the ball is thrown out to a knockdown shooter, and Solon, who very rarely ever deals with drops, the five-man's already sprinting into the ball screen. So he's arriving alone, super alone, off the basis of leveraging a separate coverage on the post up. And one more time. Okay, Zico, take the reins.
Yeah, so the last one we talked about in terms of the more complex ones is coverage calls, or what we kind of had a little bit of fun with for the history buffs. Alex Sarama, we got you. All right, Operation Fortitude. So if you're familiar with Operation Fortitude, that was what the Allies used to confuse Nazi Germany about where the D-Day landing site would be. They tricked them into believing it was Calais and hit them in Normandy. All right, from a basketball perspective, the idea here is that your screener calls fake communications of coverages. So we don't want to go into this in huge detail. It's mainly just to give you the idea and you can run with it. But for example, if you're encountering a show coverage, but you know their push call. So for example, they call ice on the sides. As your five-man sprints into the screen, they're screaming, ice, ice, ice. Now, if this happens, if we look at the diagram, five-man sprinting in, he can feel his man really attached to him and ready to show. Ice, ice, ice. The guard, who should be pushing this ball middle, jumps into a push coverage to show it baseline, and now both the guard and the big are both high side, and the guard has a rip baseline, which they'll either get a layup or dominoes will be triggered. So it's just a little idea that you can take and run with and think about what coverages you pair with what fake coverage calls and what effects you can generate.
Okay. Yeah. So with that, we're going to shift over to the punish the coverage part, and Zeke's going to take the screen here. But just to wrap up the prevent the coverage part again. So see, there's again, first understanding the reasoning behind why you would choose to go about preventing the coverage and the different levels of the continuum that may operate on. Are you just simply trying to compromise the coverage to make some of your dealing with the show passes a little bit easier? Or are you trying to completely prevent it, where now you're dealing with a drop and maybe a high level scoring guard can still be themselves and be an impactful scorer off the ball screen and not be taken away? But you can see different layers of ways to do it that range from things that your players can learn just through drill work and implement at any point in the game to more tactical things that you pick up through scouting and design through sets. And with that, I'll kick it to Zeke.
Okay, so starting to shift over now a little bit more to hopefully that's come and transition across for everyone smoothly. All right, so transitioning across now as we start going through the middle of the continuum towards the punishment end. So we've obviously talked a lot about screener priorities. So now we're moving across more to the ball handler, what we would say is more possibilities. These are things that they possibly could enact to punish coverage. All right, so prior to the screen, so they've got the ball, the screen's coming, the space prior to the screen, they have the option to reject the screen. Now there's two reasons they might reject the screen. One is to trigger dominoes. So they're thinking score or to put the defense in rotation. But the other one is to fight the coverage. This is their setup so that they get separation from their defender. And if they do a really good job, they may also cause X5 to start sinking down into a little bit of help as well, because they think that the guard is getting beat, and then they get separation for themselves and the screener. And the other one they can get pre-screen, especially if they do a great job of fighting the coverage, is a bingo, where they beat their defender on the pre-side of the screen, but between the defender and the screen, as opposed to rejecting them to the outside. And then after the screen, so they've gone past the shoulder of the screener, these ones obviously people be very familiar with, the split, all right, the hesitate and follow. So you can do the follow in isolation, but a lot of times this is the Sue Bird coming off, high dribble, eyes raised to the screener. You got me. You got me. I've stopped. It's cool. You can go back. And as soon as the screener takes the bait to go back, you follow them. And you follow them on the side opposite the ball handler defender, so your own defender. And we'll show video. And the other ones obviously is dribbling over the show, attacking the hip of that show to turn the corner, to get into the middle so that you have your own passing angle to hit the high-low on the diagonal dive or roll, and also your kick-out passes. So we'll see two different videos here focusing on these ball handler possibilities. So you'll see here, obviously this one here is a pistol into wing pick and roll. And this is a very important one to have good setup, because there's a 3-side front side. So if you don't have great setup, you're just going to run straight into a wall. And the other one, of course, is that reject is a very juicy option on these isolated clean corner, because if you can get past your man, there is very likely a layup to be available. Main focus here is elbow pick and roll, be concentrating on that spacing a lot. And even still, even though there's a two-side backside here, Shane Larkin's still able to reject and get home and get an easier layup. On the bingo, right, this critical thing here you'll see that sets up bingos is Dragic does an amazing job with his fighting of the coverage. So they're going to try to push him middle into the show, but he does a great job attacking away from the screen first into the two side. And when Patrick Beverley cuts him off, he's got his defender's momentum going this way. He's created this big bingo gap here. All right. And then this is a two side. So basically all this congestion, all this help, there's nowhere for Dragic to go, but he's baited Patrick Beverley into protecting the congestion and then opens up a huge amount of space. And Shea Frazee, very good player development coach, you know, came up with the term bingo. And, you know, he'd point out here that this setup and player development skills opens up the possibility of this gap to bingo. And you'll see Dragic right down through that gap, and also takes advantage of the fact that the five-man was very high because he was preparing to show. So the five-man help is eliminated, and he's able to get downhill onto the rim. Same thing here from Augustine. You'll see it doesn't have to be a massive setup. This is just a very brutal one bounce little move, but it's fast, it's sharp, it's abrupt, and that's enough to make the defender for Miami jump out of position. And there's the little gap to bingo through. And you can see once again how high the big removing himself out of the defense because he's preparing to show, and that opening up the split space. Now into post the shoulder of the screen possibilities. So obviously what many of you are very familiar with is the split. Right? Show not doing a great job of being attached, leaving a gap. Good job if you do great job of setup. You know, a lot of people, obviously, whose fault is the split from a defensive standpoint, and it gets pinned on the bigs, but it's probably as much, if not more, the guard. You know, if the guard gives this amount of separation, now his right hand, his inside hand is open to split to, and the big is also giving a lot of separation. So once again, great setup action. In this instance, they just give him separation, but great setup and separation allows for bingos, it allows for splits. This one here, dribble over. So the key here is to attack very, very tight to the hip and basically almost dribble through the space that the show's trying to enter into. So just you're the dribbler, they're coming into this space and just rifling right through it. If they arrive a little late, get you on the side, rock your shoulders, draw the foul, get to the foul line. A lot of guys like to use an inside arm to kind of control their hip and take any contact into their arm so they preserve the balance of their torso. And Shane Heal, some of you Australian viewers, you know, he was the master at this, getting the foul out of the hard hedge on this dribble over, and then the bigs got 2 early fouls there out of the game if the coach is that way inclined. So Dragic does a great job here, and now he's turned the corner, and he's able to get downhill off that. Another one, we talked about the follow. So you can see the show developing. Sorry. So you can see the show developing. And now what Brandon Knight is reading with that little hesitation, he doesn't really rise fake it, but he's slow. Now the big starts to leave, and he's going to try to go opposite his defender. In this instance, they get so caught up that it's actually hard for him. But if the defender had recovered over here further, his path would be to the middle. If the guard was still back here, his path would be to the outside. In this instance, he gets it there pretty much so crossed up, and he gets penetration.
Zeke, show that one again, full speed, just to get the pace of it, just so people can see the pace of it. It's a the hesitation timing is so great on it.
That little stop's what gives them the time to have the indecision. The big thinks that they can get out of there. This one here is very subtle, but a lot of times if you follow, I think like you see he goes that first bounce like he's on the follow, and the big realizes that this is problematic. He starts holding up, and obviously Chris Paul now realizes the late pass to the roll was open. But a lot of times, once you go into the follow, the big who's trying to recover realizes there's penetration. They stop, they turn back to build a wall, and then the roll develops late. Also, obviously, that follow back is kind of similar to the one where Ross talks about earlier, that the guy had come into really strong last help because he thought he was the backside defender. And when the ball comes back the other way, he's now the front side. So you can very quickly manipulate the help side to switch them from being backside to front side. And if they can't react quickly enough, then you can get cooked. These ones here are dribble overs, but more to generate the passing angle, right? Trying to get the ball into the middle to have passing angle. So first one is we talked about warning signs. We talked about constraining the defenders, catching them in coverage. All right, so this one here, here's a show developing on elbow pick and roll most likely, and Kalinic is into preemptive help. He's anticipating potential show, open roll, he has to be in. Milicic, very good big guard. LeBron James tends to be very good at this, very much a big guard skill, but there's no reason little guards can't add it, is that they do what we call a whip it pass, and they quickly whip it here. And this is not a bad thing to establish if you're playing your game, to establish early, you know, first quarter, few little whip it passes, if it's the right situation, to just hold all the help defenders accountable. Let them know, put them on notice that they have to stay attached. They can't get into early preemptive help. And then if you burn them like this a couple of times, then, you know, we're looking to see more rolls later in the game because they are reluctant to get into early help. You'll see the timing. This one here now, dribbling. Look at the setup, loses the hand a little bit, but great setup. And now he's dribbled over and he's created the passing angle. So sometimes this can be created with a messy pass, which we'll talk about soon, the quick pass, but here he's done it with the dribble and then in conjunction with a diagonal dive. So the question here for Kevin Pangos is who can help? And the question here for Tomic, the roller, is who can help? And in this situation, it's likely to come from the last man, the low man, the two side. And so they want to extend the help. So if Tomic rolls straight down here, it's not so long a help, but by coming diagonally, he extends the help and he makes the passing decisions much easier for his passer because it's very obvious what this man's doing. Is he out with the shooter? Is he in on the roll? And he's able to make an easy decision here. Similar thing, just letting it play. All right, exactly the same concept. Dribble over. They don't bail into that. They bail out of the show, but the diagonal dive creates the passing angle. Right? It's not always going to be to the roller. We see here Doncic trying to dribble over. The big stays with it, gets pulled very wide. He's now asking himself the question, who can help? And most likely it's this low man here. Is he helping? Yes, he is. So therefore we skip it back all the way to the backside corner. It's tremendous technical skills on the pass. Same situation here. Show, diagonal dive, extend the help, he commits in. All right, and this is what we say when you're trying to make it easy for your passers to make these decisions. the diagonal dive makes it very easy for them. I think almost all players who are good enough for you to dedicate a pick and roll position to them are going to be good enough to work out which one of these two people is the open receiver. Whereas if you make a straight dive, it can be very complex and difficult to make that decision. This is an obvious skip pass, and now the dominoes are falling, and they're able to use their domino concepts to get to the easy bucket.
Awesome. I think like just those two videos, such a huge aspect of player development there. And like Zeke's going to dive into some stuff tactically that you do to deal with punishing the shows, but just alone the amount of time you can invest individually with your ball handlers, with your screeners, and being able to attack shows in that manner. There's a lot to dive into there.
So with punish the show, a few objectives that you're trying to accomplish. And for this is unspecified spacing. So we want to trigger the dominoes falling, and we want to get to generate efficient shots on the rim and kick out, catch and shoot threes. Corners first, anywhere else second. And there's three basic objectives that we're trying to accomplish to get to that point. We want to isolate the tag help defender, and ideally we want to isolate the single tag defender. Shake pick and roll, middle pick and roll, you can easily do that. Wing pick and roll, you just have to accept they're going to isolate the tag defender, but it won't be a single tag. We want to stretch that tag defender. So we want to extend the distance between their help responsibility and their matchup responsibility. And you saw that done very, very well with the diagonal dives by Tomic and by Tenerife in those last few clips. And then we want to get the ball in the middle. The benefit to having the ball in the middle is that all four potential receivers are as one pass away or as close as possible, without one defender being able to defend two. So preserving our dominoes rules and putting everyone one pass away. And therefore this makes the priority passes. The Messi pass, so Lionel Messi, the greatest passer in football history, in many people's estimation, known for his quick passing. So the Messi pass, a quick pass to the too high. And the target is very important. We want to put it in front of the receiver, so you lead them into their vision and seeing the floor, and basically a chest height catch, because the next pass they're likely to make is an overhead pass. So we're talking about split seconds that you're trying to use efficiently to generate an open roll man. If you give away time by throwing behind them or low, that might be enough for X5 to show and close the roll man down. That's priority one pass. There is the pass to the short roll. If that's the case, we're trying to throw to the inside hand closest to the hoop of the receiver. And then, as we talked about in the previous thing, the maestro ball handler, the Teodosic, the Luka Doncic, the maestro, they can dribble over the show into the middle themselves and make the pass.
Something that I think we want to point out and certainly highlight that's, I think, very helpful for youth players, high school age group, college age group, even at the pro level, we've found where it helps is having emphasis calls on some of this stuff. And so certainly there's sets that you're going to target to be able to punish a show and be able to go after it. But in general, through the course of the game, there's random ball screens that occur. And sometimes there's coverage changes that happen by the defense throughout the course of the game, where now they shift to showing they weren't, and now they're getting more aggressive. And you just having clear, concise emphasis calls that you can give to your players in the course of action, not waiting for a timeout, not waiting for a dead ball, but where they can hear it, they can know it, and it shifts their eyes and their attention to the right read that they need to be making. So we use the Messi pass as the pass to the too high. So it lets them know, hey, we're going to get off it quick and play through that guy as the guy who's going to make the decisions on the pass. So something you can yell out simply to your players. Maybe you want them to look at the short roll pass. Any amount of terminology you can come up for that. You want to yell out short. You want to yell out guts, get the ball to the guts of the defense. Different ways you can go with that one. We talked about whip it passes earlier, a way to kind of build in a constraint for the defense to hold them accountable. And so something you can shift your players' attention to simply with an emphasis call. Whippets, look for whippets, look for whippets on every ball screen, or look for the guts in every ball screen right now. It just helps them simplify the read, what they're looking for.
All right, and we won't talk to it in too much detail. I'm more than happy to share the slide, the diagrams with people in the aftermath of presentation. But you can see here, this is in a shake, pick and roll spacing, and in green, the 3 objectives. So on this pass, all right, the messy pass puts the ball in the middle. That isolates the single side tag. And then this diagonal dive extends the help for X3, extends the help for X3. You can see if you had a straight dived, how short the help would be. Diagonal dive extends the help. All right, and a couple little things, because we're going to show some clips to be aware of. All right, for the receiver of the messy pass, now when we say to the 2 high, you'll see this is the 2 side. Here's the 2 high, the 2 low. We want to make the messy pass to the 2 high. So in shake, this is a front pass. And when the ball gets here, the person who receives, all right, has these options. Catch and shoot if they're wide open. Now they should have a soft focus so that they can download the information prior to the catch. The X4 is sitting back and they are the person providing the help. So no other option will be open. So it's catch and shoot. Most likely X4 will play them a little bit, and once they commit to playing them a little bit and they are not the help, that's all we need. We're not looking to take a contested jack on his face right now. All right, just make him play him a little bit. Next option is quick swing to 2. If X2's late building out of their help responsibility on the pass, quick swing. And this is the first option because it needs to be quick. If it was later in the options, he would have already got himself back out. Next look is high-low to 3, and basically they're reading who can help, the single side tag defender. Is he helping? Is he not? If he's not, we hit the big on the rim. If he's in helping, we've got skip to the backside. And if nothing develops, it'll be boomerang back to the 1 for the rescreen, or if it's a big here, it's easy for them to go to second side wing pick and roll. And then we won't talk through it extensively, but what we would like you to recognize here is that other than the messy pass now being a back pass as opposed to a front pass, because the 2 high is now behind the ball, a 2 side backside as opposed to a 2 side front side, everything else in this diagram is effectively the same. Ball to the middle, single side isolated, diagonal dive, extends the help. All right. One thing that happens a bit more with middle pick and roll versus shake is the short roll is a much more prevalent option here. And you can see that there's 2 arrows for the big, and that's because this first one is short roll, because this pass and this pass are equally as good as each other. The pass up the guts on the short roll or the messy pass, they're both killer passes. So 5's going to offer that first. And then when he sees the ball leaving the fingertips on the messy pass, he completes his diagonal dive with 1-2 hard steps to the front of the rim. We'll see a number of clips here showing you the different progressions of those options. First one, 23 gets off the ball a little bit late. All right, he gets off the ball a little bit late. We could be making a quick kickback here. He dribbles over, but he ultimately finds the kickback. This man here is sunk because he's playing in a jump, 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 high hand position to take away the skip to the backside corner to buy time for the last man who's helping, but that leaves the kickback high unprotected, and he knows that he's wide open. He's already made that download with the soft focus, and so he can step right into a shot with rhythm and great force summation. Zipper here. Now they get very preemptive with their show. And so he goes to that quick kickback. And then as we spoke about, the quick kickback. And then the man in help, so it's quick swing, all right, and get that ball there as quick as possible because he's got to catch and shoot. It's exactly the same here from Doncic. Show, high hands, diagonal dive. You can see by Porzingis extending this last help. Kick back, quick swing. This time they get the drive. So the dominoes are falling. They're able to maximize this. This time here, right, we're going to see elbow pick and roll. Very aggressive show. He doesn't even need to dribble, just straight Messi pass. And now we can see that pass back as he's heading back out to his man. And Huertas here is reading the one man who can help, the single side tag defender. Is he helping? In this case, no, he is not. Ball on the rim. This one here is out of shake, but you can see how between elbow and shake, other than the direction of the initial Messi pass, as opposed to back is front, everything else is the same. So front pass, all right, and now all the reads for this Messi pass receiver are the same. Quick swing, he can see Dublovic is running at it. No, all right, so he's reading the single side tag. Is he helping? All right, he looks, kind of is. It's not great. All right, so he's delayed here, but what it does create is a great opportunity for the five-man Poirier to get a seal. So sometimes it'll be an automatic pass like it happened here. This time, watching Poirier, 17, the five-man. All right, he kind of sees there's not a huge advantage here. He starts slowing and making sure that he seals his man. So he knows this guy's going to recover onto him, but he makes sure that he seals him so the recovery is bad, and then it's a phenomenal seal and just completely buries him and gets a catch, foot in the charge circle.
I think that's something that can often be personnel dependent. Like when you have a roller who has massive size advantage and size and strength. I mean, years ago you saw with Nikola Pekovic played for the Timberwolves and Panathinaikos. Like he rolling them so that they can get the angle of the seal in the paint. Whereas with other guys that maybe they continue their roll all the way down to the dunker spot. And they don't clog up that area in the middle of the paint. But in that situation, it fits perfectly with personnel and situation.
Once again here, this one's a shake, but you'll see once the ball's made the Messi pass, and we talked about, you know, this is a very good example of the accuracy of this pass. He's thrown it and it's landed in front. It's leading Voigtman into his vision of the floor, and it's basically a chest height reception so that he's in a pretty good position to either shoot off this, but it's leading pretty quickly into his overhead. He's reading. All right, is this man helping? Yes, he is. They probably could extend this a little bit more diagonal, and then money pass to the pocket on the skip. You know, the accuracy of the passing and player development, you'll see time and time again throughout these clips how critical it is. Same thing again here. All right, kick back, off elbow pick and roll, reading, and now he's reading, he's in, probably over helping because this is a pretty good recovery, but skip is on and dominoes are falling. This one here is a good example of, one, how important it is that the player development skills are executed well. All right, Zalgiris, very, very good team. But in this instance, you can see how everything was about to open up. The advantage was there, but the pass is behind. It's inaccurate. He has to turn away. He bobbles the pass, and they lose the advantage. But this is one thing that you want to train your team to be very good if you want them to be a tactical team, is what we call a reignition. So they lost the advantage because of a record scratch. All right, the music was playing, and then, all right, bad pass, stopped. Okay, they've got to reignite. So you'll see boomerang straight back to their best pick and roll player on the floor, five-man right back up. All right, one of the things they do know now is they've got quite a good idea that there's a show coming, bang, and they just go straight back into their punish the show coverage solution, short roll, cut and slide, which we'll cover on the next little thing. So You can see there, if you do have the inaccurate passing, you'll lose the advantage. If you ever lose the advantage, you've got to very efficiently within the shot clock, reignition. Short roll, all right. You can very quickly look at that diagram. If you need to pause later, if you're watching it in delay, you can make more notes, but for brevity of time, we'll just show the video clips on this. All right, so the first one on short roll is that the big, obviously he's got to read on the catch. So footwork is very, very critical. So you can see here, you want to basically maintain vision of the ball on short rolls. So this becomes the traditional roll as opposed to a dive. So he's going to pivot on this right foot and drop this left foot, keeping his chest wide to the ball, and he's going to use back out, reversing his direction to get the great separation. When he catches, all right, really, this is obviously a little different because they bounce pass it to him, but he wants to jump stop on this catch because very often there will be someone lining him up for a charge. In this instance, the balls are not particularly help oriented, and if that's the case, when they jump stop, they catch, they turn, they don't see anyone there, no last man, the big needs to be prepared to go in and power it home. This one here, once again, you'll see Tomic with very good footwork up in here. He jump stops because this is what's going to happen, right? This last man, a lot of times, is a little guard. He knows he's in trouble if this pass is completed, and he runs in and tries to take away the landing zone for the 5-man. And instead of it being a great play for us, it becomes an offensive foul, turnover, and your 5-man just got a personal foul. Jump stop, and obviously his reads are generally the 2 side. So once he makes the catch, the last help is in. And what we're trying to create, obviously, is that 1 can't guard 2 on this back side. And obviously, because Singleton was offering the messy pass and his defender went with it, he's completely eliminated. And now this cut cued by the short roll pass helps to make sure that 2 can't guard 1. He's able to roll down, obviously spectacular finish. See, this time it's off of shake. So off of shake, but shake, you won't get as many short rolls. It's more difficult, but it's exactly the same idea. The 2 side low, his man's left to help, string cut, cut and slide following in, and ideally this man's sliding to separate the recoveries and rotations. You see slight there. This one here, similar idea. You'll see this time here, here's the cut coming. It's not as quite as good a technical, probably precision with this, and they kind of get turned away a little bit. It buys a little bit of time for Gran Canaria to get down and take away this cutter. And this is where the slide man. Now, one of the reasons that, you know, we want to promote the slide is probably for the future. At the moment, with this cut and slide, mostly you'll see teams either get the cut or they'll get this 45 kick out. But as teams get better at realizing that they can't allow this man here to try to guard 2 people, you're going to see more and more teams start sending 1 of the 2 defenders involved in the screen to the 45. So as this progresses, you know, they're trying to run their show back to the big. He's already been marked by this person. This person's running to him. If he runs there, they now have 3 on 2. All right, so basically you're going to start seeing more and more teams sending this person here or send the guard there. And when that becomes the case, obviously this man sliding extends the separation from the show to him sliding towards the corner. So that's trying to put you ahead of the game for the coming adjustments and learnings. And this, at the moment, that's sufficient separation. See Huertas here, it doesn't always have to be cut and slide. Sometimes these guys both hold That could be because this person's on a very low help, and so there's nowhere really to cut behind him. It might be personnel dependent. They're both very, very high level shooters. Sometimes it is a little bit easier for two to play one if they both spot up. You see that they are forced into having to make an additional pass because of this, but two good shooters there, they get it done. And obviously sometimes this goes back out to the high man off this kick out.
So much of that is just these little like one can't guard two principles. As rule number 2 of dominoes that we talk about, and just all the little slides, the cuts. When you're in rotation, you're trying to put a defender in a position where he can defend too. And these little adjustments make that an impossible situation for the defense.
We talk about this being an exception, all right? And the reason there's an exception in terms of stretching the tag, help defender, all right, with short rolls or straight dives is when it's wing pick and roll. All right, so this is a wing pick and roll depicted where they're sending it middle with a 3-side front side, or step up pick and roll, which would be very similar spacing, except this would be sending the ball towards the baseline. Now here, if we turn our attention to the roll man, if you diagonal roll, this is now the gray line, you would be making the help shorter for X2. So here it's a short roll or a straight dive just into a little pocket potentially that extends X2's help. All right, they might get it from one dribbling over, hitting them on this little short roll, or it could come from the messy pass to the 2+ high, so it's to the 3 high in this instance. And now the looks for him are pretty similar. Catch and shoot, high low to the 5 man, quick swing 3, quick swing 2, skip to the 2, or he can go into a boomerang or a second side action. And of course, European ball screen continuity flow that so many people would be familiar with. This is the spacing you'll continually be in. Just a few short clips of showing that exception in terms of the spacing. So you'll see it, won't stop it much, but dribble over, short roll, roll man. This is obviously a brilliant one in terms of if you can get them to show on drags. All right, if a team's willing to show on drag pick and roll, some teams choose to do it. You should, we talked about the strategic choice, your wing pick and roll drags should go up in frequency because this becomes just money if they're going to do this. All right, so messy pass. All right, this help defender's got almost corner to cover. He doesn't go, so it becomes an easy high low. And see, they walk this ball up, but almost early in the shot clock, uncontested dunk. This one here, all right, they're kind of caught between two coverages as to whether they're switching, showing, nexting. They get a bit confused here with it, Real Betis, but messy pass, and now he makes the quick skip, bypassing here, I think, just to get it to that corner as fast as possible before this person can build out to his help. And now they're in dominoes, drive and kick sequence. Ball doesn't stop. This one here's the similar principle, that idea of trying to get the number of passes, the speed of the ball rotation to get it to the shooter as fast as possible. Last time we saw them bypass the 45. This time you're going to see the 45 set a pin screen, but the very similar ideas. So messy pass ahead, way too much help in many ways here. Off this, deep help, pin in, bullet pass, and it makes it one messy, one quick swing. We get the ball to the shooter for a wide open catch and shoot as quickly as possible. Let's have a little look at that Utah pass again at the end. All right, bang, quick, pin, shot. Another little exception that can come up, what we termed a freeze screen, and we kind of called this the mailman exception because Karl Malone had quite an interesting and successful, obviously, theory about how to be a screener in his time. So a freeze screen, we want to do minimal provocation. All right, so do as little as possible to provoke the coverage, and that gives you a head start on separating into your coverage solution. So if you have to go all the way in and do the screen to provoke the coverage, you have to cover more ground to get into your coverage solution. But if you can still way over here provoke the coverage as opposed to come all the way, you can get out into your coverage solution earlier. You'll see it in a clip. The idea of the mailman exception is he used to set very static screens, and his goal was to arrive together. So on the complete other end of the continuum, arriving alone compromises the coverage. And sometimes you compromise it to the point that you prevent it altogether. And that makes it unpredictable. So the mailman exception is to arrive together. To completely accept the coverage, almost to bait it, you back yourself. We're so good at punishing the show, we're going to give them the show. Make it very nice and easy. Here, have a show. Very nice. All right. And we're going to bait them into it, make them predictable because we back ourselves to punish it. So that was kind of Karl Malone's philosophy. All right. So that gives you the other end of the continuum. And you'll see in this little clip here, right, so the freeze screen, all right, so this is the person we're focusing on. He's in a freeze, all right, he's not coming and getting it. He's going to ask the dribbler to do the work to get to it, and he's out early, right? So he's done enough. He freezed, he's provoked the coverage. His man's coming off his body, giving him separation. He can more quickly get out into his coverage solution. In this instance, he goes to short roll, and he has that quick separation. And now we get into what we talked about with the solutions on the short roll. So bang, and a hold and a kick out. So just watching it again from the start. All right, freeze. He's done minimal provocation, out early into his coverage solution, and then he uses the right punishment strategies on that short roll.
Again, this is that part is, we touched on it in the screener priorities, and we talked about trigger advantage and the 3 different ways that could be defined as: 2 to the ball, gentleman's stance, or mismatch. And that can apply to multiple different coverages. Here we're speaking of shows, but in general, it's a concept that you can speak to in trying to do the minimal amount. So the moment that he's able to trigger that coverage, as Zico spoke to, he's able to get out of it. So he's not in it any longer than he needs to, and he can create maximum separation from his man in a sense.
So when we talk about the overview from the coverage solution, and we showed in Ross's part, he basically showed you from this little dotted line this way. All right, we looked at this part of the continuum earlier. Now we open it up and look at the entirety of the continuum. Right, same idea. We can't become a prisoner of the coverage. And at one end of prevent is avoid. And we mentioned this earlier. So this would be not running pick and rolls. It would be pushing the tempo. It would be disruptive defense to try to create fast break opportunities. It would be running different plays, mashes, off ball screens, post ups. All right, this is when we really don't back ourselves to defeat their pick and roll coverage. As we come down, we get to our prevents. All right, and obviously Ross gave you the comprehensive overview of how to do that. And we're talking about here where we more super alone, all right, in this compromised kind of gray area, or in our case, yellow on the traffic light. In the middle, it's compromised and super alone. And obviously as you become more and more alone, you go from it being compromised towards prevention. If we go the other way, you're slightly alone, you have a compromised coverage, all right, and obviously the less and less alone you are, the more you're into the punish the coverage, all right? So if you arrive super alone, what a lot of times happens, of course, is the team recognizes that this will be a bad show, and the big bails out of the show and plays like a medium drop, in which case you've prevented the coverage. If you're only arriving slightly alone, this is great. They still think they can show, but it's a compromise show, which helps you to punish it. And another thing that we'll have a future presentation on with offensive design is the concept of margins. And in many ways, you're trying to get them to accept the most compromised show that you can and still do it. So the little margin in here, right? If you could arrive super alone and they still tried to show, you'd have a ridiculously compromised show. Most likely you will punish it and punish it badly. All right. Where in this line of arriving alone can you get to and they still try to do their primary coverage right on that area? All right. And so that's something you're trying to probe and find that point and do the minimal provocation to still get a compromised coverage that you can punish. And then right down this far end is accept the coverage, bait. And this is where we talked about the freeze screen just a moment ago. The mailman exception is way down here. Accept the coverage, right? Align them, predictable. They're going to do exactly the coverage they want to do, and you back yourself to punish it. And as Ross alluded to at the start, you know, we obviously have many opportunities for you to engage with our material. Really appreciate it. You know, follow the Instagram. There's a whole glossary there, hundreds of video examples of some of the concepts we've discussed today and many other concepts. Ross has worked very hard at building that database over the last few years, and then we've got it really firing and pumping, regular posts on there of late. Twitter, you know, a great chance to engage with us, and also we'll share a lot of the material on there as well. And then if your preferred medium is Facebook, and then really follow those things also to keep your eyes open for future presentations. You know, this presentation was on prevent and punish coverages. That idea is transferable to any trigger. Down screens, they're going to do a low side double team on the post. You know, we could go on and on about the different triggers and the different coverages, and you can prevent and or punish those coverages. So we're going to be looking to roll out more and more presentations on different pick and roll coverages and how you can apply prevent and punish, similar to this one, for different coverages like push and switch and medium drops and so on, and then also potentially other triggers. So if you're following us on these, then you've got opportunity to know about those presentations. And then finally, we run rapid fire sessions on a regular basis. Okay, so this is basically where we give you a number of scenarios. For example, a very basic one might be shake, pick and roll, 1-5, prevent the show. 1-5, elbow pick and roll, punish the show. Those would be very basic ones. So if you're looking to basically take this learning from a passive environment like you've had today and make it more active, where you really engage with it, get your competence, get your conceptual understanding, get your confidence by getting as close as you can to in-game timeout reps, and then in a supportive community where you're getting feedback, you're getting discussion, you're getting a great opportunity to ask questions, interact with some really outstanding coaches, not just myself and Ross. We'd feel fortunate if you considered us that, but some awesome coaches that come on board as well and are so willing to share, as many of probably watching have been a part of. You know, the next one's tomorrow. It's going to be on this theme, prevent and punish the show. So if you're wanting to engage and really check for your own understanding, we'd heavily recommend signing up www.efficientsource.com and go on and sign up for one tomorrow. Then the next one is on Saturday, and that's going to be with the exact same theme as well. So a lot of opportunity for you to engage with this material.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a unique new way for coach development that we're hoping you guys find valuable. And certainly selfishly, I think for me and Zeke have found very valuable, and just it's fast tracked our reps in terms of being able to be put under the fire and having to come up with something relevant to a certain scenario that in our sessions, quote unquote, the referee calls out, and having to react, draw something. You have a minute 10 to do it, and it's a safe space in the rapid fire saw sessions. Everyone's drawing at the same time, and it happens quick. So it'll go scenario for about 10, 12 straight, and then we'll have a halftime discussion on the theme for that day. Then at the same time, we'll also be offering hot seat sessions, which are smaller groups, three to four people in the session. And now that's one person drawing at a time. And there's a lot more feedback involved. So some different things to sharpen your saw as a coach. I know for me as an assistant coach, allows me to get the reps on the whiteboard that I don't necessarily get in season or in the actual game. And so it's a way to keep improving and keep challenging yourself.
And finally, if you want individual mentoring, one-on-one sessions basically are tailored to whatever questions or needs you have. You can also message us via any of those mediums, and we will individually discuss and tailor a session to you. So thank you very much for your time. I guess if you're open to questions.
Yeah.
Zach,
There's a few other questions here. I don't know if you guys wanted to stick around for another minute or two just to, or we could just have them email you guys afterward. It's up to you.
We can do a few questions, I think, Zeke, right? You want to jump out of your screen? We can
absolutely
put it up. I think I see a few in here.
Yeah. So that first one, do you have any advice or tips for getting a player to buy into the idea of being a good screener? Obviously not a lot of people's favorite part of the game of basketball, setting screens, but how do you get people to really buy into that and maybe take some pride into it?
I think the first part is like attempting to try to mature your player's view of the game of basketball. And if you can understand and convey the concept of dominoes to them and the many ways that can be triggered, and the massive part and very important part and critical part that they play in being able to trigger dominoes where now everyone eats. There's a lot of ground you make up there, let alone now if you can arm yourself with the video exemplars to be able to show and kind of show that screening is just as intricate of a skill as any other skill that you could teach in the game. From a ball handling perspective, different moves you may make in pick and roll or in isolation or in post-ups, screening has it all. It's just as much of a deep dive as a player can make. And I think once a player realizes that and they see all the different places to go and place to learn, a lot of time that's exciting to a guy. But it takes maturing their view of it beyond just, man, I just gotta run up here and hit this guy and be a sacrificial lamb for the whole team. Like, I think once you expand their view beyond that, you start to make a lot of headway.
I think, as Ross alluded to, there's the video exemplars, and obviously that's also showing video exemplars are really high-level players that, that question I'd imagine is like a high school or college coach often. It's always to get more, a scholarship, professional job, a bigger professional job, more money, more minutes. There's always those motivations as well. I mean, I guess the question alludes to someone who you're worrying that they won't be as team-oriented to want to do this sacrificial job. Okay, there's a lot of reasons for you to selfishly want to do this as well. Like a lot of the people we're showing in those clips, they're making a lot of money and their best skill is screening. And then I think your player development, like if you start putting the great player development workouts in on all these things, then, they generally want to do what they do in player development. And then, obviously as a coach, we control minutes. And so whoever among your players do this job the best, if this is the job you want done, they get the lion's share of the minutes. And then hopefully they buy into wanting to do that job because that's what's going to get them on the court and all the other things that comes to them. So it's like really prioritizing this as being the critical skill and knowledge for your fives.
And looks like Beck wants to see if you guys have mailman exception clips to show.
You got to go back in the archives for that one. That was before I was born.
One is actually really cool with that though is that I think if you search on YouTube, there's actually a TNT video where he actually talks about it. He's a bit older by that point, but if you're trying to get some of the theory, that's really cool to be able to hear it from the mailman's mouth as opposed to the horse. And we probably could find some, but they probably won't be in high def.
Yeah, no, but that would be a very useful clip, I guess. If people want to reach you guys just for any other questions they may have as they're meditating on this, about this specific presentation, is there an email or something that you guys would have for them, or a social media channel, anything like that?
Yeah, just efficient sauce @gmail.com. We check it all the time, and send us through anything there that you want to talk about. At the same time, you can talk to us directly on the sauce sessions, on the rapid fire sessions, if you just jump on one, and we're accessible there in addition to the other avenues we talked about. But yeah, social media @efficient sauce on Twitter, on Instagram, very accessible on both of those platforms too.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again so much, Ross and Zico. That was excellent stuff. And thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back in action again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Central Time. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.